Low, unsettling drone hums in the background, like a deep, slow breath filling the room. Total darkness, only the sound of faint breathing. It started 3 nights ago. I woke up at exactly 3:12 a.m. No alarm, no noise, just awake. Like something had been watching me, waiting for my eyes to open. Faint flickering, a blurry shape in the darkness, the sound of something shifting just out of view. At first, I thought it was sleep paralysis. You know that feeling? When your body won't move, but your brain is screaming at you to run? But this was different. My body could move, I just didn't want to. A low, wobbling distortion creeps into the background, almost like a whisper buried inside the static. Because I felt it, the weight of something in the room with me, watching, waiting. Blurry footage, a dark shape in the corner, almost human, but too still. Then it spoke, not a growl, not a whisper, just my name. Plain, flat, spoken like a fact. Bass swell, deep, hollow, vibrating in the chest. I turned my head, slowly. The way you do when you know something is behind you and you're praying it isn't real. But in the mirror across the room, I saw it. A figure, standing exactly where I should have been. The camera distorts. The shape in the mirror lingers, just wrong enough to make the stomach sink. It was me, but not me. Too tall, too thin, its head just a little too far to the side, and its mouth. God, its mouth. Sudden silence, nothing but breathing. I should have woken up. I should have snapped out of it. But I didn't, because that thing, it was smiling at me. The figure's head tilts, then cut to black. And now, I don't think I was supposed to see it. Sudden distortion, screen flickers, silence. Have you ever woken up and felt like something was watching you? Tell me in the comments. It started with an email. At first glance, it seemed like spam, just another meaningless message buried in the clutter of Ethan's inbox. But then he saw the subject line: I see you. Viewer's username. The sender? Unknown. No reply address. No way to trace it back. Just those 4 words. He stared at it for a long time. A joke, maybe? A prank? But he hadn't told anyone about the creeping sense of unease he'd been feeling lately. How for the past few nights he swore he wasn't alone in his apartment. The feeling only grew stronger. Then the text messages started. Short, cryptic, his name, a single word at a time. Ethan. Are you there? But the second he tapped to reply, they vanished, erased before he could screenshot them, before he could prove they were ever there. Then the calls. An unknown number, no voicemail, no response, just silence. The first time, he let it ring out. The second time, he answered, Hello? Nothing. Who is this? A breath, barely audible, then click. Ethan set his phone down, laughing to himself. Weird, creepy, but probably nothing. Then he heard it, a creak from the other room, slow, deliberate, like the sound of someone shifting their weight on the floorboards. He held his breath. The apartment was small. He would have seen if someone had broken in. He had locked the door, hadn't he? Then another sound, something sliding across the counter. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He turned the corner. Nothing. The kitchen was empty. But his keys, they weren't where he left them. They had moved. Maybe he was imagining things. Maybe. Until that night, lying in bed trying to ignore the weight in his chest, he heard it, his smart speaker clicking on. A soft mechanical chime, then his name. Ethan. The voice was wrong, distorted, a whisper that crackled through the speaker, stretched and warped like a recording played backward, then static, then silence. His pulse pounded in his ears. He sat up, staring into the darkness of his room. His phone lay next to him. No notifications, no alerts. Had it really happened? And then, the final moment. He felt it before he saw it. that prickling at the base of his skull, that deep instinctive knowledge that he was being watched. Slowly, he turned his head, and there, just beyond the window, it was standing there, watching him. It wasn't human, but it saw him, and now it knew he had seen it. The unease had settled into Ethan's bones like a slow-moving poison. He sat in the dim glow of his laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, searching, hoping that someone else had seen what he had, that he wasn't alone in this. A deep breath, a click, an anonymous forum buried in the recesses of the internet flickered onto the screen. Unexplained phenomena, sleep paralysis, or something else. Threads upon threads of whispered confessions, eerie encounters, and desperate pleas for help. And then a username caught his eye. Mia. Her post was simple, cryptic. It only stops if you give it another name. Another name? Ethan leaned back in his chair, the words repeating in his mind like a sinister riddle. The air in the room felt different, thicker, a quiet, suffocating presence pressing against him. He exhaled sharply, shaking off the thought. It was probably just sleep deprivation playing tricks on him. That's when he noticed the file, a video file, one he didn't remember recording. His stomach twisted as he clicked it open, the screen filled with grainy black and white footage, his own room, his own bed, himself, sleeping. His breath caught in his throat. The camera angle was impossible, too high up, like it had been filmed from the ceiling. His sleeping form lay motionless under the covers. But then, from the darkness of the corner, something moved. A shift, a shadow, a figure. Standing behind him. Ethan's hands trembled. He scrubbed through the footage, his pulse hammering in his ears. Every instinct screamed to shut the laptop, to stop watching. But he couldn't. He had to know. Then came the worst part. His sleeping form turned its head toward the camera, wide, empty eyes, a frozen smile. But Ethan hadn't moved. The breath in his lungs turned to ice. He slammed the laptop shut. No. This had to be a prank, a trick of the light, a corrupted file. But the moment he looked up, his stomach dropped. His reflection in the darkened screen wasn't looking back at him. It was watching him. A delay, a heartbeat too slow. When he lifted his hand, the reflection hesitated before mimicking the motion. The longer he stared, the more he noticed the subtle, wrong details. The eyes, just a little too dark. The mouth, twitching at the edges. And then, from the corner of his vision, a handprint, smudged against the glass of his window, from the inside. Ethan jerked back, knocking his chair over with a loud crash. The room was spinning, his pulse erratic. He needed to get out. Now he fumbled for his jacket, grabbed his keys, and took a shaky step toward the door. And then a voice, his own voice, from the other room, calling his name. Ethan! The air around him grew dense. The shadows stretched long and unnatural. He knew, with every fiber of his being, that if he turned around, he would see something he wasn't meant to see. Something that had been waiting for him to notice it. Something that had been growing stronger. Cut to black. Ethan knew he had to leave. Every instinct screamed at him. This town was wrong. The people, the streets, the air itself felt off, like the world had been stretched too thin, revealing something beneath. So he ran. His car growled to life beneath his trembling fingers, headlights cutting through the endless dark. He barely remembered the turns, only that he had to get out. His hands gripped the wheel so tightly, his knuckles turned white. The town limits couldn't be far. Then the gas station. A single flickering bulb illuminated the rust-streaked pumps. His car slowed on its own, as if the road itself expected him to stop. Ethan hesitated, heart hammering. He needed gas. Just enough to get past the empty fields, the whispering trees. He stepped out. The attendant was already watching him. A man in an oil-stained uniform, face obscured by the brim of his cap, standing too still, as if he had been waiting just for Ethan. The moment their eyes met, the attendant smiled. "Fillin' up, Ethan." A jolt of ice shot through Ethan's spine. He hadn't introduced himself. He hadn't been here before. "How do you know my name?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. The attendant's grin stretched too wide, his teeth too perfect. "Everybody knows you, Ethan. You can't leave without saying goodbye." Ethan didn't answer. His hands shook as he reached for his wallet, fingers fumbling. His phone slipped from his pocket, clattering onto the pavement. The screen lit up, one new contact added. A lump of cold fear lodged in his throat. He hadn't added anyone. He hadn't even unlocked his phone. And then he saw the name. Unknown, no number, no profile picture, just a name. But when he clicked it, his stomach turned. The contact had a photo now. It was him, not a mirror image. No. The skin was a little too smooth, the eyes just a shade too dark. And the mouth curved into something that wasn't a smile. A message appeared beneath it, typing in real time. "I see you." Ethan's breath caught. He looked up. The gas station was gone. No flickering light, no rusted pumps, just an empty stretch of road stretching into a horizon that should have been familiar. But it wasn't. His hands clenched around his phone as his pulse pounded in his ears. Then, footsteps behind him, slow, deliberate. He turned. Nothing. Only the endless dark pressing in from all sides. His phone vibrated again. Another message. "Turn around." He couldn't move. He wouldn't. His body felt frozen, locked in place by a force beyond reason. But his hands, they were moving. Without his command, his fingers slid across the screen, opening the contact. A voice note, his own voice, but the words, "There is no escape." A sharp knock at the window made him jump. He was in his car. When had he gotten in? How had he started driving again? The knock came again. He turned his head, pulse hammering. Outside his window, a letter. Crisp, white paper, fluttering against the glass as if some unseen hand had placed it there. Slowly, breath hitching, he reached for it. The moment his fingers touched the page, his stomach dropped. It was his own handwriting, his own words. "There is no escape." He wasn't alone anymore. Ethan could feel it. Something in the air had shifted. The world seemed thinner, like the space around him was stretching, bending to accommodate something that shouldn't be here. He turned, and there it stood. At first, his mind refused to process it. The figure was familiar, too familiar. It had his height, his posture, his face. But the eyes were darker, deeper, like two empty voids carved into flesh. The corners of its lips curled upward, too smooth, too deliberate. Not a smile, something else, something hungry. The thing tilted its head, studying him the way a predator observes its prey. Then it spoke. "You brought me here." The voice was his, but not. A second too slow, a note too deep, like someone speaking through a fogged mirror. Ethan stepped back, breath coming in ragged gasps. "No." The thing took a step forward. "Now, let's switch places." The world lurched. Ethan's vision swam, his mind fracturing, breaking apart like a reflection shattering into 1,000 jagged pieces. The last thing he saw, his own face, smiling, as everything went dark, and just like that. Ethan is gone. No scream, no struggle, just a blink, a flicker of the screen, and nothingness. Yet, I'm still here, still speaking, even though there is no one left to listen, no one left to tell the story, no one left to warn you. But you're still here, aren't you? Watching, listening, because you can't look away, whispering, you should look away. But you won't, because you feel it now, don't you? That heavy, crawling sensation, like something just woke up behind you, like something just learned your name, your screen. It's flickering now, isn't it? That's not a glitch. That's it looking at you. Because now it knows. It knows where you are. It knows what you've seen. It knows you. Now it knows your name too. Screen goes black. Total silence. Did you just hear something? Did your phone just buzz? If you made it this far, tell me. Tell me what you heard. Tell me what you saw. I'll be watching.